Adesola and Nkem were stepsisters, but they couldn't have been more different. Adesola was kind-hearted, hard-working, and full of dreams, always striving to make a better life for herself. She believed in honesty, kindness, and perseverance, despite the struggles she faced. Nkem, on the other hand, was spoiled, manipulative, and filled with jealousy. She had everything handed to her, but still resented Adesola's intelligence, beauty, and the love she received from others. No matter how much she had, she always felt threatened by Adesola's presence. Their father, Chief Olumide, had remarried after Adesola's mother passed away. His new wife, Ezine, brought her daughter Nkem into the family. But instead of creating a loving home, she and Nkem treated Adesola like an outsider. Adesola was burdened with all the household chores, while Nkem enjoyed a life of luxury. Despite the mistreatment, Adesola never lost hope. She continued to work hard, dreaming of a brighter future. But Nkem, consumed by jealousy, was determined to ruin her happiness at any cost. This was the beginning of a battle between goodness and envy, a tale of resilience, betrayal, and ultimate justice. After Adesola's mother passed away, her father, Chief Olumide, remarried a woman named Ezine. Ezine brought her daughter, Nkem, into the family, and from the outside, it seemed like a new beginning. But for Adesola, life took a painful turn. Instead of finding comfort in her new stepmother and stepsister, she was treated like an outsider in her own home. Ezine never accepted Adesola as her own child. She favored Nkem in everything, showering her with love, expensive gifts, and attention, while treating Adesola like a servant. Every day, Adesola was forced to do all the household chores, cooking, cleaning, and running errands, while Nkem lived like a princess, never lifting a finger. If anything went wrong in the house, Adesola was the one blamed and punished, even when it wasn't her fault. Despite her hard work and good heart, Adesola was constantly reminded that she didn't belong. She ate last, wore old clothes, and was given nothing but orders. Ezine and Nkem never missed a chance to humiliate her, making sure she knew she was not wanted. Yet, through it all, Adesola never complained. She held on to hope, believing that one day, life would change for the better. What she didn't know was that her stepmother and stepsister had no intention of letting her happiness last. Adesola was not just hard-working at home, she was brilliant in school. Despite waking up before sunrise to cook and clean, she never let exhaustion stop her from excelling in her studies. She paid close attention in class, asked thoughtful questions, and always completed her assignments on time. No matter how much Ezine and Nkem tried to weigh her down with endless chores, Adesola remained determined. She refused to let her circumstances define her future. Her teachers adored her, often using her as an example of hard work and discipline. Even students who barely knew her admired her resilience. She had a quiet confidence, a natural beauty that shone not just in her features, but in the kindness she showed to others. Despite her hardships, she always carried herself with grace. When classmates struggled, she offered to help them. When she saw someone in pain, she comforted them. It was impossible not to like Adesola. Nkem, however, despised everything about her. No matter how many expensive tutors her mother hired, she still struggled in school. Her grades were poor, and teachers often compared her to Adesola, which only fueled her rage. It didn't help that Adesola, despite all the suffering at home, was still more beautiful than her. While Nkem spent hours picking out the most expensive clothes, styling her hair, and doing her makeup, Adesola's natural beauty outshined her effortlessly. The attention Adesola received from teachers, classmates, and even strangers was unbearable for Nkem. She hated how people spoke about Adesola's bright future, as if she were destined for greatness, while Nkem, the pampered one, was being left behind. The jealousy burned deep inside her, growing stronger every day. She couldn't understand why Adesola, the girl she and her mother treated like a servant, still managed to be happy. How could someone with nothing still shine so brightly? The thought tormented Nkem day and night. She couldn't accept it. She refused to let Adesola win. In her twisted mind, she believed that if she couldn't be the best, then she would make sure Adesola never got the chance to succeed either. From that moment, she vowed to destroy Adesola's happiness, no matter what it took. Adesola had always dreamed of going to university. She worked harder than anyone else, studying late at night after finishing her chores and waking up before dawn to revise. all her hard work finally paid off when she won a full scholarship to a prestigious university. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, her ticket to a better future. When she received the news, she was overwhelmed with joy. For the first time, she felt like her dreams were finally within reach. But Nkem couldn't stand it. The jealousy inside her boiled like fire. How could Adesola, the girl she treated like a maid, get such an opportunity? It wasn't fair. While Nkem struggled in school despite all the tutors and privileges she had, Adesola had earned this scholarship through pure hard work. The thought of Adesola leaving and building a successful life away from them was unbearable. She had spent years trying to break Adesola's spirit, and now she was about to escape. Nkem refused to let that happen. Late one night, while everyone was asleep, Nkem sneaked into Adesola's room. She knew exactly where Adesola kept her scholarship documents, the acceptance letter, school forms, and identification papers. With a wicked smile, she swapped them with fake, incorrect documents, knowing it would cause a disaster. Then, as if nothing had happened, she quietly slipped back into her own room, waiting for the chaos to unfold. The next morning, Adesola walked into the scholarship office with excitement in her heart, holding on to the dream she had worked so hard for. But when the officials checked her documents, their expressions changed. They told her there was a problem. Her details didn't match their records. Confused and panicked, Adesola tried to explain, but they simply shook their heads. "We're sorry," they said, "but you do not qualify." Her heart dropped. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. How could this be? She had received the acceptance letter. She had followed all the instructions. Tears welled in her eyes as she begged them to check again. But the answer remained the same. The scholarship was gone. Devastated, Adesola walked home in silence, her dreams shattered. When she arrived, Nkem was waiting, pretending to be surprised by the bad news. She watched with hidden satisfaction as Adesola broke down in tears, crushed by the loss of the opportunity she had worked so hard for. That night, as Adesola lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with tears streaming down her face, she wondered why life was so cruel. She had done everything right, yet happiness was always snatched away from her. She didn't know the truth, that the real thief of her dreams was living under the same roof, smiling in the shadows, satisfied that she had won this battle. Losing the scholarship felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Adesola had worked so hard, only to have her dreams taken away in an instant. But the worst was yet to come. When she returned home, broken and hopeless, Ezina didn't offer her comfort. Instead, she made things even harder. With a cold, unforgiving tone, she told Adesola that since she had failed to secure her future, she was no longer allowed to continue school. There was no point in wasting money on her education. From that day forward, she would work as a maid in their home. Adesola's heart sank. "Please, Mama Ezine, give me another chance. I will find another way," she pleaded. But her stepmother's face remained hard. "Enough," Ezina snapped. "You are lucky we even let you stay in this house. From now on, you will earn your place by working. No more talk about school." From that day, Adesola's life became a never-ending cycle of suffering. She was up before sunrise, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, cooking meals, and running errands. The work was endless, and no matter how much she did, Ezina and Nkem always found an excuse to insult her, call her useless, and make her feel small. Meanwhile, Nkem lived like a queen. She slept in, ate the best food, wore designer clothes, and spent her days gossiping with friends. While Adesola struggled with aching hands and sore feet, Nkem lounged in comfort, sipping expensive drinks and mocking Adesola's misery. There were days Adesola wanted to scream, to ask why life was so unfair. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was treated worse than a stranger in her own home. But no matter how much they tried to break her, she refused to give up completely. Deep inside, a small spark of hope remained. She didn't know how or when, but she promised herself, one day she would escape this life. One day she would rise above it all. One evening, after a long and exhausting day of chores, Adesola was sent to the market to buy groceries. As she walked through the crowded stalls, carrying a heavy basket, she heard a familiar voice call her name. She turned around and saw Madame Ifeoma, an old family friend who had known her mother before she passed away. Madame Ifeoma was a successful fashion designer, known for her elegant dresses and creativity. She took one look at Adesola and could see the sadness in her eyes. "My dear, you look so tired. What has happened to you?" she asked with concern. At first, Adesola hesitated, but something about Madame Ifeoma felt safe. Slowly, she opened up about her struggles, how she was forced to drop out of school, how she was treated like a maid, and how she had lost hope in ever building a better future. Madame Ifeoma listened carefully, her heart aching for the young girl. She had always seen something special in Adesola, and now she was more determined than ever to help her. "You may have lost one opportunity, but that doesn't mean your future is over," she said with a kind smile. "I see talent in you, Adesola. Have you ever thought about fashion design?" Adesola's eyes widened. She had always loved beautiful clothes. When she was younger, she would admire the elegant dresses in magazines and imagine creating her own designs. But she had never thought it was possible for someone like her. "I don't know how to sew," she admitted. "Then I will teach you," Madame Ifeoma said firmly. "But it must be our little secret." And so, a new chapter in Adesola's life began. Whenever she was sent to the market, she would stop by Madame Ifeoma's shop. Hidden in the back room, she learned how to sketch designs, cut fabrics, and use a sewing machine. It wasn't easy. Her hands, already rough from scrubbing floors, struggled at first, but she refused to give up. Every night, after finishing her chores, she practiced in secret, using scraps of fabric that Madame Ifeoma gave her. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Adesola's skills improved, and with every stitch she made, her confidence grew. She discovered a passion she never knew existed. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the way out of her suffering. She didn't know how yet, but deep down, she believed fashion design would be her key to freedom. The city was buzzing with excitement. One of the biggest fashion competitions of the year had been announced. Designers from all over dreamed of participating, knowing that the winner would gain international recognition, mentorship from industry leaders, and the chance to launch their own fashion brand. When Adesola heard about it, her heart pounded with excitement. This was it. This was the chance she had been waiting for. Madame Ifeoma saw the light in Adesola's eyes and didn't hesitate. "You must enter," she urged. "You have the talent. This could be your way out." Adesola hesitated at first. The thought of competing against professionals was terrifying, but deep down, she knew she couldn't let fear hold her back. With Madame Ifeoma's encouragement, she decided to take the risk. Every night, after finishing her endless chores, she would sneak into a small corner of the house and work on her designs in secret. She sketched with passion, carefully selecting fabrics and creating masterpieces with her hands. Her designs were unlike anything else, bold, unique, and full of life. She poured every bit of her soul into them, knowing that this was more than just a competition. It was her chance to break free from the life of suffering she had been trapped in for so long. But her biggest enemy was watching. Nkem had always despised Adesola's success, but this time it was different. This wasn't just about school or beauty. This was about Adesola rising above everything, breaking free from the life they had forced upon her. Nkem couldn't allow it. The thought of Adesola becoming someone important while she remained in the background was too much to bear. One evening, Nkem followed Adesola and discovered her secret workspace. When she saw the breathtaking dresses, her jealousy exploded into rage. The fabrics shimmered under the dim light, each piece a testament to Adesola's talent. It wasn't fair. Adesola, the girl they had treated like a maid, had created something so beautiful. Nkem clenched her fists. She wouldn't let this happen. That night, when everyone was asleep, Nkem crept into the room. The moon cast eerie shadows as she picked up Adesola's dresses one by one. With a twisted grin, she grabbed a pair of scissors and began slashing through the delicate fabrics. The smooth silk, the carefully embroidered lace, she destroyed it all. She ripped stitches apart, poured black ink over the sketches, and shredded everything beyond repair. By the time she was done, Adesola's months of hard work were nothing but ruins. The next morning, Adesola walked into the room, excited to make final adjustments before the competition. But the moment her eyes fell on the destruction, her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she picked up the torn fabric, her heart shattering with every ruined piece she touched. It felt like someone had ripped her soul apart. Tears streamed down her face. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, only to have it all taken away in a single night. She fell to her knees, staring at the wreckage, unable to believe what had happened. Just then, Nkem appeared at the door, leaning against the frame with a smirk. "Oh no," she said, pretending to be shocked. "What a terrible accident. Looks like you won't be entering the competition after all." She laughed softly and walked away, leaving Adesola drowning in despair. For a moment, Adesola felt like giving up. It was too much. Life had been cruel to her over and over again. Maybe this was her fate, to always be stepped on, to always lose. But then something deep inside her refused to surrender. She wiped her tears, took a shaky breath, and looked around the ruined room. She wasn't going to let Nkem win. The competition was tomorrow. If she had to stay up all night, she would. If she had to sew until her fingers bled, she would. No matter how broken she felt, she wasn't giving up. Not this time. With renewed determination, she grabbed the least damaged pieces of fabric and started working. The night was long, and exhaustion threatened to consume her, but she pushed through. Because this wasn't just about a competition. This was about proving to herself and to the world that she was stronger than the people who tried to break her. Adesola sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her dreams. The beautiful dresses she had spent months creating were destroyed, torn to shreds by Nkem's cruelty. Tears streamed down her face as she held the ruined fabric in her hands. The competition was just hours away. Everything she had worked for was gone. For a moment, she wanted to give up. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was never meant to succeed. But then, deep inside her heart, a fire ignited. She had come too far, struggled too much to let this be the end. If life had taught her anything, it was that she had to fight for what she wanted. Wiping away her tears, Adesola took a deep breath and stood up. She grabbed her sewing kit and the least damaged fabrics. Her hands shook, her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. Stitch by stitch, she worked, pouring every bit of pain, determination, and hope into her creations. She didn't have time to recreate everything, but she would make something new, something even more powerful. Hours passed, and just when she thought she wouldn't make it, a knock came at the door. It was Madame Ifeoma. The moment she saw the mess, her heart broke for Adesola. But then she saw the fire in the young girl's eyes. "You are stronger than this," Madame Ifeoma said firmly. "Come with me. We will make it in time." With the last piece of fabric in hand, Adesola rushed out with Madame Ifeoma. The competition venue was grand, filled with the best designers in the country. As Adesola arrived, people stared. She was the last contestant to register, just minutes before the deadline. Nkem, already at the event, gasped in shock when she saw her. "Impossible," she whispered. Despite the sleepless night, despite everything she had been through, Adesola walked onto the stage with her head held high. As the models showcased her designs, the entire room fell silent. Her dresses, though not what she originally planned, were breathtaking. They weren't just clothes, they told a story of resilience, strength, and survival. The judges were amazed. "These designs are extraordinary," one of them said. "Not only are they beautiful, but they have emotion, soul." When the final results were announced, Adesola's heart pounded in her chest, and then her name was called. She had won. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. She had done it. She had proven to herself, to Nkem, to the world, that no one could break her. As she stood on stage, holding her trophy, she caught sight of Nkem in the crowd. Her stepsister's face was frozen in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. Adesola smiled. This was just the beginning. Her journey had only just begun. Adesola's victory at the fashion competition was just the beginning. Overnight, her name spread like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about the young designer who had overcome so many obstacles to win. Newspapers wrote about her, fashion blogs praised her work, and top designers wanted to meet her. Offers started pouring in, mentorships, collaborations, and scholarships to study fashion abroad. With Madame Ifeoma's guidance, Adesola carefully chose her next steps. She traveled to some of the biggest fashion capitals, Paris, Milan, and New York, learning from the best in the industry. Everywhere she went, people were amazed by her creativity and unique designs. She didn't just create clothes. She told stories through fabric. Her work reflected strength, resilience, and beauty, and the world took notice. Within a few years, Adesola launched her own fashion brand. What started as a small workshop soon became a massive empire. Her collections were worn by celebrities, showcased at international fashion weeks, and sold in luxury boutiques. She built a life she had once only dreamed of, one filled with success, respect, and financial freedom. Meanwhile, back home, Nkem watched in disbelief. The same stepsister she had humiliated, betrayed, and tried to destroy was now one of the most famous fashion designers in the world. Everywhere Nkem turned, she saw Adesola's face. On magazine covers, on TV interviews, on billboards in the biggest cities. At grand events, Nkem would sit in the audience, watching as Adesola walked the red carpet, dressed in her own designs, surrounded by important people. She had everything: fame, fortune, and admiration. People who once ignored her now begged for her attention. Nkem burned with jealousy, but deep down, there was something else: regret. She had spent so much time trying to destroy Adesola that she had done nothing with her own life. While Adesola had risen, Nkem had remained in the same place, stuck in her bitterness. The girl they once treated like a maid had become a queen in the world of fashion, and there was nothing Nkem could do but watch. As Adesola's star continued to rise, Nkem's life took a very different path. With Adesola no longer around to overshadow her, she believed she could finally shine. But instead of working hard or building something meaningful, Nkem wasted her time chasing a life of luxury. She spent money recklessly, buying designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and throwing lavish parties just to impress people. At first, it seemed like she had everything she wanted. She traveled to exotic places, posted glamorous pictures online, and surrounded herself with friends who praised her wealth. But Nkem had no real ambition, no skills, and no plans for the future. She lived off her parents' money, thinking it would last forever. Then, disaster struck. Her father, Chief Olumide, made a series of bad business investments and lost a huge part of his fortune. At the same time, Ezine's careless spending habits drained whatever was left. Suddenly, the endless flow of money stopped. The luxury Nkem had taken for granted began slipping through her fingers. One by one, her so-called friends disappeared. The people who once laughed at her jokes, attended her extravagant parties, and flattered her beauty were nowhere to be found. Her expensive belongings had to be sold to pay off debts. Her once glamorous lifestyle crumbled before her eyes. Desperation set in. Nkem had never worked a day in her life, never learned a skill, and never planned for the future. She had always relied on her parents' wealth, but now, even they had nothing left to give her. With no options left, Nkem was forced to do something she never imagined. She turned to Adesola for help. Swallowing her pride, she reached out to her stepsister, the same girl she had tormented for years. She arrived at Adesola's fashion house, standing nervously in the grand lobby as models, designers, and business executives walked past her, all working under Adesola's empire. She never thought this day would come, but here she was, at the mercy of the very person she had tried to destroy. Nkem took a deep breath, her hands trembling. She had no choice now. Adesola was her last hope. Nkem sat in Adesola's luxurious office, her heart pounding. The walls were decorated with awards, fashion sketches, and pictures of Adesola with celebrities and powerful business leaders. It was a world Nkem had once looked down upon, but now she wished she could be a part of it. Adesola entered, her presence commanding but calm. She looked at Nkem, the same stepsister who had once tried to ruin her life, now sitting before her, desperate and broken. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a deep sigh, Adesola said, "What do you want, Nkem?" Nkem swallowed her pride and looked away. "I need a job," she admitted. Things aren't good for me anymore." Despite everything Nkem had done to her, Adesola still had a kind heart. She could have laughed in Nkem's face, thrown her out, or reminded her of all the pain she had caused. But instead, she chose grace. "I will help you," Adesola said. "You can start as an assistant in my company." Nkem's eyes widened in shock. "An assistant?" she repeated, insulted. "Yes," Adesola said firmly. You have no experience in fashion or business. You need to start from the bottom. Nkem clenched her fists. After all these years, after everything, she was being offered a low-level job. She had come here expecting a position of power, maybe even a partnership, but Adesola was treating her like just another employee. Her pride burned. Instead of accepting the opportunity, Nkem stormed out of the office, her heart filled with rage. She refused to work under Adesola, refused to take orders from the girl she once controlled. But as she walked away, a dark idea formed in her mind. If she couldn't rise, she would make sure Adesola fell. Fueled by jealousy, Nkem began spreading rumors about Adesola. She contacted gossip blogs and social media influencers, telling lies about how Adesola had stolen her designs and mistreated her family. She painted herself as the victim, hoping to destroy Adesola's reputation. At first, the rumors gained traction. Some people began questioning Adesola's success, but karma had its way of setting things right. The truth always finds a way to come out. Old friends, former classmates, and even household staff began speaking up. They exposed Nkem's past betrayals, how she had sabotaged Adesola's scholarship, destroyed her fashion designs, and treated her like a servant. Evidence surfaced, proving Nkem's lies. The same media she had tried to manipulate turned against her. The world saw Nkem for who she truly was, a bitter, jealous woman who had spent her life trying to destroy someone else instead of building her own future. Meanwhile, Adesola only grew stronger. She didn't need to fight back. Karma did it for her. Nkem's downfall was complete. Every door she once walked through with pride was now closed to her. The so-called friends who once praised her beauty and wealth ignored her calls. She had no money, no career, and no reputation left. She had spent years trying to destroy Adesola, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. Meanwhile, Adesola continued to thrive. Her fashion empire expanded across continents, and her name became even more powerful. She wasn't just a designer, she was an icon. Her story of resilience inspired millions, proving that kindness and hard work always win in the end. One day, Nkem found herself standing outside Adesola's grand office building once again. But this time, she wasn't here to ask for a job. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. With a heavy heart, she waited, hoping her stepsister would see her. But she wasn't the only one who came that day. Izina, too, had lost everything. Chief Olamede's failed investments had left them with nothing, and the social circles that once embraced her had long abandoned her. The proud woman who once treated Adesola like a servant now stood before her, humbled and broken. When Adesola finally stepped out of her office, she saw them both, her wicked stepmother and her jealous stepsister, standing in the same place where years ago they had treated her like an outsider. Izina's eyes filled with tears. "Adesola, my daughter, please forgive me," she whispered. "I was blinded by my own selfishness. I see now how wrong I was." Nkem, too ashamed to speak, lowered her head. She had spent her whole life envying Adesola, but now she could no longer deny the truth. Adesola had won, not because of luck, but because of her heart and determination. Adesola looked at them for a long moment. A part of her still remembered the pain they had caused her, but she had grown beyond that pain. She had built a life for herself, not out of revenge, but out of strength. "I forgive you," Adesola said softly, "but I will never forget." She would not allow them back into her life, not after all the years of cruelty. Forgiveness was for her own peace, but trust was something they would never earn again. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heart lighter than it had ever been. As Izina and Nkem watched her disappear into the world she had built for herself, they finally understood. Jealousy and hatred had brought them nothing but misery, and Adesola, the girl they once looked down on, had become untouchable. Adesola stood on the grand stage, the golden award shining in her hands as the audience erupted in applause. Flashing lights from cameras filled the hall as journalists and fashion icons celebrated her victory. She had come a long way, from being a girl forced to clean floors to becoming one of the most powerful names in the fashion world. She smiled as she looked out into the crowd, feeling nothing but gratitude. She had won not just an award but the life she had always dreamed of. Her fashion empire was now a global brand. Celebrities wore her designs, Magazines featured her collections, and young designers looked up to her as a role model. She traveled across the world, opening fashion schools to help talented young girls who had no opportunities, just as she once had none. She used her success to lift others up, proving that true victory wasn't just about personal success, it was about making a difference. Adesola's life was full of love and warmth. She had people around her who truly cared for her, not because of her money or fame, but because of who she was. Madame Ifeoma remained her mentor, always by her side, proud of the woman Adesola had become. She found real friends, ones who celebrated her achievements and stood by her in difficult times. She had built a life where she was respected, valued, and most of all, free. But while Adesola was reaching new heights, Nkem was falling deeper into the darkness of regret. Her days of luxury were long gone. The designer clothes, the expensive vacations, and the fake friends had disappeared. Now she lived in a small, run-down apartment, struggling to make ends meet. She had no job, no influence, and no one to turn to. The same people who once laughed at her jokes now ignored her calls. The same society that had admired her beauty now forgot she even existed. She tried to find work, but no one wanted to hire her. She had no skills, no experience, and a reputation for being cruel and deceitful. She was forced to take small jobs she once thought were beneath her, cleaning offices, working as a cashier, and struggling to pay rent. Every night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by her mistakes. If she had only been kinder, if she had only worked harder, if she had only chosen love over jealousy, her life could have been different. One evening, Nkem sat alone in her tiny apartment, scrolling through social media. She came across a live video of Adesola at a major fashion event. She looked stunning, standing on the red carpet, surrounded by reporters eager to interview her. She spoke with grace and confidence, her eyes filled with happiness. The world admired her, not just for her talent, but for her resilience and kindness. Tears welled up in Nkem's eyes. This was the girl she had spent her whole life trying to destroy, yet Adesola had only grown stronger. And now, she was left with nothing while Adesola had everything. It wasn't because of luck, it was because Adesola had worked for it. She had faced betrayal, pain, and injustice, yet she never let hatred consume her. She had turned her struggles into power. For the first time, Nkem truly understood. Jealousy had been her greatest downfall. Instead of celebrating Adesola's success, she had tried to ruin it. Instead of working on herself, she had focused on tearing others down. And in the end, karma had given her exactly what she deserved. Meanwhile, Adesola sat in her penthouse suite, looking out at the city lights. She had won in more ways than one. She had proved to the world, and to herself, that goodness always prevails. Her heart was at peace, and her life was full of love, success, and happiness. That was the sweetest victory of all.